Just days before President Ramaphosa announces his cabinet, there's already been contentions about the interpretation of the GNU agreements and what the rules of engagement say about the adoption of new members to the GNU. Now, the ANC and DA have different interpretations, and this stems from the DA's objection to the news of the Patriotic Alliance joining the GNU. So what does the GNU agreement say about the adoption of new members? Must all signatories be consulted beforehand? Can a signatory be outvoted by others if they are against the adoption of a new member? Well, UNISA Political Sciences Professor Dirk Kotze joins me now to weigh in on this. Good morning, Professor, and thank you so much for your time.
Good morning. Thank you very much.
First and foremost, much as the ANC failed to achieve an outright majority, they are still the biggest party. So one would think that it's their prerogative who they go to bed with. So before we get into the agreement, what does the law say?
Well, the law doesn't say anything. But the only document that is available is the declaration of intent that the ANC and the DA signed originally, and that all the other parties are supposed to sign as they join this formation. And in that it makes provision for what they call the GNU Consultations Council, and all the parties already in this agreement, or that signed this agreement, become part of it. And it says that that council must be consulted when new members want to join. So I think, but there's no a difference of opinion of at what stage this declaration of intent is activated. And I think that's obviously a question of interpretation between the different parties. But for me, it looks as if it became active on the day when the president was elected, on the 14th of June, because there are two addendums to this declaration, which regulates that, to say that the president will go to the ANC, and the speaker to the ANC, and the deputy speaker to the DA, and the chairperson to the NCOP. That has been implemented already. So I think in that sense, this agreement has been activated and is now starting to be binding on everyone.
All right, let's talk a bit more about this application, or rather the activation of this GNU. Now, the ANC said that it had not signed the statement of intent with the DA alone. So as indicated, the GNU is a multi-party partnership. It invited 12 parties, and the DA was simply the first to sign. Right? So, however, the DA, as we've seen, have expressed a different understanding of the agreement, saying that the ANC, the DA, and IFP were founding members of the GNU. What is the significance of this? Please help us understand.
Well, I think what it means, possibly in the minds of the DA, maybe also the IFP, is that they have an equal status with that of the ANC. And therefore, all initiatives, all negotiations must also include them. Well, I think what is happening in practice at the moment is that the ANC is the one who conducts most of these negotiations. And when they think it's necessary, consult with or inform the DA and the IFP. But there's no indication in this document, this declaration, of this notion of founding members. It's simply absent. It doesn't exist there, or it doesn't appear there. So I think it is something of an interpretation by the DA and maybe by the IFP, but it is not something which is an official part of this agreement, in writing at least.
Yeah, this has got to be like one of the most confusing agreements because there's so many various interpretations of a written agreement. Now, the DA says the ANC failed to consult it before allowing or inviting, rather, the Patriotic Alliance that's led by Gator McKenzie into the GNU. Now, the first question would have to be around this process of consultation with parties already part of the GNU. Must signatories be consulted beforehand? And also, equally importantly, can a signatory be outvoted by others if they are against the adoption of new members?
Yes, as I indicated, in my interpretation is that this consultation council is the mechanism through which the consultation about new members should take place. Whether that is happening, we don't know. I must say, as a general point, there's very little leaks coming out of these processes. So we have very little information to work with. Whether all parties must agree, the way in which the disagreement is structured is that they say, and that is more for decision making within the government, but I think it can be applied to this situation also, is that they want to work with consensus as a principle, but if there's no consensus, then there must be sufficient consensus. And a sufficient consensus is 60% of all the members together. And that means it's the ANC and the DA. So in the end, my interpretation will be that it is the DA or the ANC and the DA that must come to an agreement about new members, but not all the other members, because the number stands, if I'm correct, one loses track of it, but around about 9 parties. The UDM is now the latest one that joined together with the Freedom Front Plus.
Yeah, after seeing that statement that the UDM released yesterday, the first question in my mind was, did the ANC consult the DA and its founding members before inviting the UDM? And if the DA, for instance, or even the IFP had to object to the UDM forming part of the Government of National Unity, what then happens when they disagree?
Well, there is a dispute resolution mechanism that they have also included in this agreement. It's not yet clear how it is going to work in practice, but I guess in the end, the main mechanism will be that it will end up with the main leaders, the national leaders of these parties, because most of these negotiations are conducted by teams of these parties. We know who's the team of the DA. It is mainly Tony Leon and Alan Zille. And on the side of the ANC, it is now the 7 office bearers of the ANC. But it normally does not include what they will call the principals. And that is President Ramaphosa on the one side, John Steenhuisen, and then the president of the IFP and the other presidents. The smaller the parties become, the less they would use this approach. And the national leaders will become most possibly much more involved in. Take, for example, the UDM, the decision making will be done by General UNISA. So I think in that respect, this is our. So in the end, it will be a resolution that will have to be made by President Ramaphosa and John Steenhuisen in person. If the other lower structures of this arrangement cannot reach an agreement. But the idea of dispute resolution is something very critical. It exists also at lower levels, for example, at the metro level. These agreements also include the notion of dispute resolution mechanisms.
Yeah. Let's talk about the appointment of executive members. Now, as we know, it has always been the president's prerogative to appoint who he sees fit in his cabinet. But interestingly here, apparently Section 17 of the GNU's Statement of Intent says that as much as it recognizes the president's prerogative, however, it also states that such appointments should be done in consultation with the leaders of the respective parties of the members considered for appointment. This is very confusing because it's quite ambiguous, isn't it? So is it the president's prerogative still?
He is the one who makes the final announcement. And as you say, it's consultation, so it doesn't mean that they have to have absolute agreement about it. But it takes us actually back to 1994. This is a statement or a principle that they took directly from what happened then when President Mandela, but especially then the Deputy President Mbeki, was the one who was negotiating with the other 2 parties. And that's exactly what happened. They negotiate the positions that were earmarked for the other parties, and I guess the same is happening now. So there must be a more or less a consensus or an agreement between President Ramaphosa and his team on the one hand, and the different parties before he will make his announcement. But he does have the final say in this.
Gayton McKenzie of the PA has gone on record having said that the reason why Helen Zille does not want the Patriotic Alliance to be part of the GNU is because the PA are the only party who can unseat the DA in the Western Cape. Now, do you think that the PA is capable of unseating the DA in the Western Cape?
Not at the moment. We see that results, the DA received 55% and the PA, Patriotic Alliance, 9%. So there's a vast difference between them. There was, before the election, quite a lot of speculation about it. And it's no secret that the PA concentrates on the colored community. And that's an area where the DA did lose some support. But it's not about a question about roots that the PA will become the next government of the Western Cape. They are still, 40% behind that.
All right. And then in closing, Professor, and very briefly, just to pick your brain before I let you go here, it seems that the government of national unity is on a slippery slope. What are the chances of survival of this GNU? And should it collapse, what happens next?
No, it won't collapse. I'm quite sure about that. The stakes are simply too high. It is a decision which has been made public to the world, to South Africa and the world. And therefore, there will be so much pressure on the main leaders within this formation, the government of national unity, that they don't have a choice. They must make it work. There is no other option. The other option will most possibly be then that we must go back for another election.
All right.
Because if this doesn't work, Parliament and the executive will become unworkable.
Thank you so much for your time. That was UNISA Political Sciences Professor Dirk Kotze.